their best. It's Friday here on The Story, and tonight, controversy over a pride flag being flown in conservative Idaho, why the mayor says it's staying put, defying a new state law. Plus, what is going on with the city of Portland's homeless camping ban? Is it even being enforced? Well, we've got new numbers from the mayor's office and what the police chief has to say. But first, a viewer recently wrote to us saying, "You've been talking a lot about the city of Portland's budget shortfall, but I haven't been hearing about Washington County." Well, turns out Washington County's budget is also not doing that great. And it's our big story tonight.
We're already hurting in our communities. It's already scary in our communities. Even more cuts makes it scarier.
Hearing that budget cuts could happen, across the board like that, I think it's definitely a concern. I wouldn't like to see that.
So that was the word on the street today from some people who live in Washington County when it comes to budget cuts. The county is in the middle of figuring out what services to get rid of to fill a $20.5 million budget gap in the county's general fund. Philip Bransford, the communications director for the county's administrative office, tells me nothing is off the table.
It's challenging. This is difficult, and this is not the first year we've been at this. We've been looking at general fund budget gaps. This is the 5th year in a row that we've experienced.
So why does this keep happening? Bransford points to inflation and increased population, but primarily the property tax rate is to blame. Washington County has the lowest permanent property tax rate among all the counties in the Portland region.
We're operating in a system, a property tax dependent system, that is by design going to be constrained. So back in the 90s, the system was put in place. It capped and rolled back property tax rates for all local governments. And that system is doing what it was designed to do. It's a very steady, slow growth system, and that slow growth is not keeping up with those cost increase.
So what does this more than $20 million budget gap mean for people who live and work in Washington County? Well, every county department that gets money from the county's general fund was asked to prepare 3 different budgets: 10% cuts, 13%, and 17% cuts. Now, these are departments like the sheriff's office, parks, library services, housing programs, and the district attorney's office. So today, I sat down with DA Kevin Barton to see how those proposed cuts would impact his department.
It's different levels of horrible. I mean, it's like asking someone which limbs do you want to cut off your body? And we are beyond the point where we're trimming fat. We're cutting into bone. And especially now in this era, no one is interested in defunding public safety, defunding police, defunding DAs. But that really is effectively what we're forced to take a hard look at doing, given the county's budget scenario.
The Washington County District Attorney's Office is requesting more than $22 million from the county's general fund. DA Barton tells me he's under the impression the county administrator will move forward with proposing 10% cuts to his department, which Barton says will be devastating. Again, these cuts are not yet final.
If 10% cuts are imposed, then public safety in Washington County will not look the same tomorrow as it does today. Already we're looking at potential layoffs of 19 people in the DA's office in our Child Support Enforcement Division. And we're also looking at the potential for some funding to be less secure to support district attorneys and staff as we're making sure that we can prosecute these cases beyond the Child Support Division. And I find that to be very troubling.
Now, those layoffs in the Child Support Enforcement Division would essentially shutter the local branch, which has been around since the 1960s. And they serve mostly single moms, ensuring that they get the money they're owed to help care for their children. But even beyond that child support program, DA Barton says depending on what percentage of cuts the county decides to move forward with, he warns there could be whole levels of crime that they just stop prosecuting.
That's just absurd. And yet, of course, we were asked to provide the scenario, what would it look like, and so we did. So on one hand, thankfully, they chose the least of the evils in front of us, the 10 rather than the 17, but they're still asking us to cut off a limb. and that's not a good thing. At the end of the day, we're providing less effective resources to address a growing problem, and the community will begin to see the impacts of that, and we know where that goes. It's called Portland.
Okay, so that was what's potentially happening at the district attorney's office, and it's not great. So we asked the Washington County Sheriff's Office how the cuts could affect its operations, but we haven't heard back yet. I also wanted to see how the county's Housing Services Department would make out after potential cuts. They handle things like shelter, affordable housing, rent assistance, and case management work. Well, turns out they have a slightly different challenge ahead. Here's Assistant Director Jess Larson.
There should be no reduction in services because of those general fund reductions.
Okay, that sounds great. And that's because the Housing Services Department gets less than $2 million from the county's general fund. But they are feeling the hit from the forecasted drop in regional government metros' supportive housing services tax money. Because of that, they're prepping for 15% cuts from programs that rely on that metro money. That means some outreach workers and housing navigation workers could be cut. And they are preparing to scale back some temporary shelter programs.
These resources are so critical in our community every day, helping connect someone to shelter or housing and keep them in that housing. So we work really hard to make sure that they're going out the door as effectively as possible. Well, of course, we're always advocating for continued, stable, and hopefully increased resources, because the need is much greater than the resources.
Now, if it feels like everywhere you look, no matter where you live, cuts are coming to local services, that's because they probably are. This is a statewide problem. According to a survey done by the League of Oregon Cities, roughly 1/3 of Oregon's 241 governments are all facing similar budget challenges to Washington County. And Washington County leaders are not at all hopeful that it's going to get better anytime soon.
So we don't have a crystal ball, but we do know that there's a pattern here, and we're going to need to make decisions, smart decisions that put the organization in a better footing, more stable funding over time.
Washington County's final proposed budget will be presented to the Budget Committee on April 28th, with a potential approval vote on May 20th. But before that, there will be several opportunities for you to share your opinions with the county, and they want to hear from you. And so do we. So, if you live in Washington County, what services are most important to you? What do you think about cuts coming for the 5th year in a row? And even if you don't live in Washington County, as you heard from the DA, what happens there impacts surrounding cities. So let us know what you're thinking. Email us at thestory@kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. Well, turning now to an update to a story that we brought you last night, one that we've been following for quite a while. Portland City Council voted unanimously against Portland General Electric in their bid to cut down around 400 trees along 5 acres in Forest Park in order to build new transmission lines. The decision came after a rally in front of City Hall yesterday and a marathon 5.5-hour council meeting. It has been a roller coaster for both PGE and the groups trying to stop their plan. The city land use hearings officer gave the project the green light in March, and then the Forest Park Neighborhood Association and Forest Park Conservancy appealed that decision to council. Councilors last night said they couldn't figure out why the hearings officer made the approval in the first place.
Yeah, colleagues, I came into this hearing today leaning towards denying the appeal, honestly recognizing that we are in a moment of crisis and needing to upgrade our transmission system. But based on the evidence on the record, based on the report, the staff report from Senior City Planner Morgan Steele, I can't understand how the hearings officer got to the decision that they made based on a plain text reading of the law.
And PGE has pledged to improve almost 8 acres for every one impacted by the project. They say they'll plant 900 trees and 8,800 native plants in the project area and give $2.5 million to Portland Parks. They say they need to make sure the grid can keep up with society's increased reliance on power. But councilors say PGE didn't make a strong enough argument that there was no other solution than cutting down trees in Forest Park.
Everyone here supports climate resiliency and the creation of good jobs. I don't think I am disputing the benefits of bolstering the grid. This is something we've discussed in the Climate Committee, and that it is something of the utmost importance. But this is ultimately a matter of law and process. And in my view, PGE did not provide adequate fact-based support for key components of this application, including its consistency with the NRMP, its alternatives analysis, and its proposed mitigation plan. Big claims require citations, and I did not see citations where it would make sense to see them. On this record, I see no sufficient factual basis to set aside agency expertise and the input of a well-informed public in favor of the judgment of a single officer whose findings are inadequately supported. So I vote to support the appeal.
And PGE says they're disappointed, but they're going to keep working on it. They told us the need for this project remains urgent. We will review the findings when released to determine the next step necessary, including a potential appeal to the Oregon Land Use Board of Appeals in order to continue delivering reliable, safe service that this project would have achieved. So it is not over for PGE. Last night's vote was a tentative approval of a move against the utility. It's scheduled to come back before council on May 7th for final approval. Well, coming up next on the story, we check in on Portland's camping ban, which calls for legal consequences for people who repeatedly refuse offers of shelter if they're camped in the public right-of-way. We see it all over town. So is the ban being enforced? Details when the story returns. Turning now to an update on Portland's homeless camping ban. As it stands right now, on paper that is, if someone is camping on the public right-of-way and refuses the offer of shelter multiple times, they could be arrested or given a fine, jail time, or both. Now you might be wondering why you haven't heard much about this in the past few months. Well, since January, police have only gotten involved in a case like this twice. 2 times. Once on January 7th, police gave someone a citation, and another time in early February, but the person at that camp relocated on their own, according to the mayor's office. Now you're probably thinking, hold up, just 2 times? That is a small number given the amount of people camped on the public right-of-way across Portland. Well, that may be intentional, and here's why. Mayor Keith Wilson ran on the platform that he would end unsheltered homelessness in 1 year, a lofty, if not impossible goal. And he doesn't see arresting people as a way to do that. Instead, he wants to open more overnight shelter and day centers. This camping ban ordinance went into effect before he took office in January. And I've learned that Mayor Wilson made some changes to how the ban is being enforced. Here's what he told us during a recent taping of KGW's Straight Talk.
We cannot arrest our way out of unsheltered homelessness. So I've really kind of pulled back the officers from doing that, because all you're guaranteeing when you arrest somebody and or cite them or take them into jail is you're ensuring that person's going to be homeless for another day.
So this week, I asked Portland Police Chief Bob Day what he thinks about this and how he sees law enforcement's role in all of this.
I don't see this as a stop from what our normal mission is. We just want to make sure that we can be very intentional and supportive of where the mayor is trying to go, which I believe in, and also make sure our officers are prepared for those enforcement encounters that may or may not occur.
So do you agree that Portland Police shouldn't have a role in enforcing camping policies?
Well, I think what I agree with is that Portland Police should be the last resort. But I have been really clear since I took over that there is an accountability to this necessary to us to be able to facilitate this change. And that accountability sometimes does rely upon enforcement, and we will be prepared to do that. If necessary, we will make arrests around people's failure to comply with the direction of getting off the streets or getting into shelters or whatever, however we set that up come next couple of months.
Now, Mayor Wilson has also called for the end of camp removals, especially when camps are swept and then set up just a few streets over. It's still unclear if and when changes to that program are coming, but we will be watching. Well, now let's get to some of your thoughts on our big story from last night, looking at preparations for tolling along the I-5 bridge between Portland and Vancouver. Tolling will be part of the new I-5 bridge when and if it's ever built. But what surprises many people is that tolling will start on the current bridge as early as spring 2026, so 1 year away. Dave wrote to us saying, "I do not like tolls. However, they are a necessary item to get a new I-5 bridge. We have to have this bridge to move commerce north and south. Sometimes we have to do what is best for the community as a whole. I do not like tolls, but let's get this bridge built before it falls into the river."
People better hurry up and just get it done, because prices will continue to go up. And then one thing that nobody really thinks about is, I used to work at Providence, and a lot of our nurses live on the other side in Washington. Everyone needs to stop thinking about the greed, especially our state, city, and governments, and just get the projects done.
And whenever we talk about tolls coming to the I-5 bridge, someone is quick to point out a potential consequence.
I think what's going to happen is that the 205 bridge is going to be constantly gridlocked. And even though you might pay to go across the interstate bridge, it won't have that much traffic.
The I-205 bridge, otherwise known as the Glenn Jackson Bridge, cannot be tolled on the Washington side thanks to a state law. But the option is there for Oregon, being that there's no law forbidding it. Now, in March of last year, we asked ODOT Director Chris Strickler if the agency was looking at tolling the I-205 bridge, and he said no. Today, we emailed ODOT asking if that's still the case, and they confirmed they are not exploring tolling on the I-205 bridge. So everybody, remember the date, April 18th, 2025. ODOT says they are not looking at tolling the I-205 bridge. Well, coming up next on the story, the battle over political symbols like flags seems to never end. We've seen how it sometimes plays out. Newburgh comes to mind, but a new state law in Idaho hoped to put the matter to rest, but it seemed to accomplish the opposite, with Boise's mayor openly defying the law. What law enforcement has to say about it. That's when the story returns. Our final story tonight takes us east to Boise, Idaho, where the city's mayor is openly violating a new state law. And it all has to do with flags. Earlier this month, Idaho's governor signed House Bill 96, which says government entities like the state, counties, cities, and towns can only fly certain flags on their property. Things like the state flag, military flags, school or tribal flags. The law went into effect the moment Governor Brad Little signed the bill. And it didn't take long for some to complain about a pride flag flying outside of Boise City Hall. But even after getting 2 letters, one from the state attorney general and the other from the local sheriff, Boise Mayor Lauren McLean made it clear that the flag isn't going anywhere. So, will she face consequences? Well, there's a catch. The devil is in the details, as they say. Brian Holmes has the story.
For the time being, it was pretty clear this isn't a crime, and we're going to keep doing what we've done for a decade, and that is fly a flag that symbolizes our commitment to being a safe and welcoming city for everyone, that embraces diversity in each and every one of our residents. It says that unequivocally, and we will keep doing what we've always done.
You say it isn't a crime, but it is against the law.
There is a whole bunch of things that we're analyzing in those letters, and as I said before, we're going to keep flying the flags we've flown historically.
Government buildings should represent all Idahoans and not be used for political or social movements.
When this bill was going through the State House, did you talk to anybody about it? Did anybody talk to you about it? Anybody from the legislature?
I didn't have conversations about it. It was pretty clear in the testimony provided that this was about one flag.
What it seems like we're getting to is that there's just one flag that is objectionable, and that is that rainbow flag that we're seeing. The only photos I see, I don't see a Appeal to Heaven flag. All I see are rainbow flags.
And this is a time when I will continue to say that we've done this for a decade. Boiseans are proud of the symbol that this is for our community. We will keep doing what we've always done.
Do you think you have legal standing for that?
Somebody's got to decide that. I'm doing what I believe is right.
What did you think about the Attorney General's letter that you should follow the law just because that's what you should do?
I really appreciate that. He also pointed out some other things with regard to the bill.
The last paragraph of the letter from Labrador does point out the lack of criminal or civil penalty in the law, but claims the mayor should comply out of a sense of duty to the oath of office. The letter from Ada County Sheriff Matt Clifford said, "This new state code fails to tell me what the required penalties would be, nor does it lay out what kind of violation it would be." Sheriff Clifford also pointed out he can't just cite or arrest a government entity, since laws usually apply to people.
The sheriff's letter was pretty clear. There's nothing he could do. And I've been pretty clear that we're taking both these letters into account, and we'll keep flying the symbol of our commitment to our residents.
Question from the gentleman, 26.
And while there were a lot of questions in the State House,
so would CSI be able to maintain those international flags?
About what flag would be at risk?
Would those flags then be not able to be displayed at those celebrations?
Nobody asked about enforcement. We did ask Representative Heather Scott, the bill's sponsor, why an enforcement mechanism was not included in the bill. Her answer? There's a presumption the government will follow the law. If we had to write a penalty into law for every single direction we give to government, our code would be tens of thousands of pages. However, there was one other city mentioned during debate.
Would the city of Bonners Ferry be able to continue flying the Canadian flag?
Bonners Ferry,
Senator Taves,
is about 30 miles from the Canadian border.
It's a little bit of a gray area, to be honest.
And to welcome visitors from the Great White North, they've flown a maple leaf flag for decades, and they still do.
Is the Canadian flag still flying outside City Hall?
It is, hey, it is still flying, yes. We still have it up.
Okay, great. One last question. Have you guys received any letters of complaints about it at all?
No, we have not.
Yet the city of Boise has.
So if somebody said, "Can you put up a Don't Tread on Me" flag? Would you consider that?
That's really interesting discussion. But the answer is no, because we're flying flags that have been flown historically rather than new flags. Because it is an unequivocal statement of our commitment to being a safe and welcoming place for everybody.
An unenforceable law. Imagine that. The Idaho Attorney General added in his letter that lawmakers should put strong enforcement into this bill next session. For example, denying tax revenues to entities that fail to comply. When Boise's mayor was asked if she's worried about that, she said they'll deal with that if it ends up happening. Well, that is the end of our show, folks. Thanks so much for watching. Timbers 360 is coming your way next. And don't forget, everyone has a story to tell. If you ever miss an episode of The Story at 6:30, we re-air the episode at 8:30 and 10:30 p.m. on our TV app, KGW+. It'll also be there the next day at 11:30 a.m. And you can download the free KGW+ app right now. It's on Roku, Apple TV, and Fire TV. Now, next week, I'm taking a vacation, but you'll be in good hands with Evan Watson. So I hope you'll join him weeknights at 6:30. And in the meantime, have a great weekend. Enjoy the sunshine.